Good evening, welcome everyone, welcome. Good evening, welcome to the McNay, and welcome back to San Antonio, Connie Choi and Deborah Roberts, who are here with us tonight as our 2022 distinguished lecturers and the chief creative forces, among the chief creative forces behind the exhibition True Believers, Benny Andrews and Deborah Roberts. I'm Rich Asti, the McNay's very proud director and CEO, and it's my honor to welcome you on behalf of our incredible board of trustees and very gifted staff to the First Modern Art Museum in Texas and tonight's distinguished lecture. It's also my honor to thank the co-organizers of True Believers, Renee Barrio and Lauren Thompson, for once again giving us beauty, hope, and inspiration from their work. And it's also my honor to thank the funders, and there are many, who brought Renee and Lauren's vision to life, among them the Brown Foundation, the Alturas Foundation, the McCombs Foundation, the Flora Crichton Visiting Artist Fund, the Henry Luce Foundation, the SEMS Foundation, Forrest and Cynthia Miller, and our host committee chairs, Robert Brown and Dennis Carbach. Please join me in applauding our gifted, generous speakers, curators, and funders. A little bit about tonight's speakers. Connie Choi is Associate Curator at the Studio Museum in Harlem in New York City. I had the pleasure of working with her there at the Brooklyn Museum. And 2 years ago, Connie's catalog, Black Refractions, Highlights from the Studio Museum, received the Henry Allen Moe Prize for Catalog of Distinction in the Arts. Connie's also, thankfully for us here in San Antonio, the author of 10 short essays in our catalog, our own catalog accompanying this exhibition, True Believers. And speaking of Connie's catalog, that's what I'm going to now call it, you will all have a $5 discount if you purchase that book this evening. It's a stunner, and it makes an excellent holiday gift. Just saying. Deborah Roberts made her McNay debut here in 2018 with the exhibition For Texans, The Next Chapter. 2 years later, the McNay very proudly purchased our first Deborah Roberts, a large mixed media collage titled True Believer that you see on the screen here on the left. And that work, the title of that work, became the inspiration for the title of the entire exhibition upstairs. Since 2018, Deborah's art has inspired many exhibitions, including Deborah Roberts, The Evolution of Mimi at Spelman College in Atlanta, If They Come at Stephen Friedman Gallery in London, and Deborah Roberts' I'm at the Contemporary Austin, the Museum of Contemporary Art Denver, and the California African American Museum in Los Angeles. And Max and I saw it in 2 of those 3 venues. We would have kept going if the show kept going. It was so riveting. 3 months ago, Deborah was named the 2023 honoree for the Texas Medal of the Arts. So as you can see from the format tonight, we're a little more intimate. It's actually not a lecture. It's a conversation between Deborah and Connie. And it's once again entirely funded by the late Louis and Frances Wagner. And among past McNay distinguished lecturers who benefited from the Wagner's largesse are visual artist Willie Cole, writer and transgender activist Jenny Boylan, New York Times art critic Holland Cotter, artist, activist, and professor of Chicano Studies Judy Baca, and art world activists, the Guerrilla Girls. So as you can see, the list of distinguished McNay lecturers is impressive, and it's about to get even more esteemed. So please join me in welcoming back to the McNay the 2 brilliant people who are about to take us there, Connie Choi and Deborah Roberts. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's lovely to be here tonight. Thank you all for joining us, especially as we're getting so close to the holidays. And of course, as always, thank you, Deborah, for being here. I thought we'd start just with a reminder to everyone of the view that you see practically when you walk into this building, this beautiful installation exhibition, brilliantly co-organized by Renee and Lauren, and the view as you walk in with this archway, this entryway, framing these 3 paintings, two paintings by Benny Andrews on either side, Portrait of Despair on the left, and then on the right, The Way to the Promised Land. But it's really, Deborah, your work that greets visitors, that welcomes visitors in. So I thought we'd start with that, with True Believer. As Rich was saying, this is a work in the McNay collection, and so all of you here will likely be very, very familiar with it over the years as it comes out into the galleries. But what I love about this work is that this young girl is directly confronting us as visitors, as viewers, right? She's staring us straight in the eye, but she's extending a hand, almost like an olive branch. She's welcoming us into the show. And so I'd like to just ask you, who is this girl? Who is this girl to you? What does she represent for you?
Well, mainly when I do works like this, it's always this notion to, I can bring more people into my world if I extend my hand instead of having a closed fist. So in this work, I wanted to do I don't really paint, I love painting, you know that. And so once I collaged the face, and actually this is work we did too much painting, because it's supposed to be 80% collage and 20% painting. But we did so much paint on this, and when it came down to the hand, I could easily have collaged it, and I said, no, I'm just gonna go ahead and draw it, because I haven't done that in a long time. I want this little girl to be everybody's little girl. She is somebody who is extending a hand out for help, or to bring you into her life, to say that we're in this thing together. This idea of, of innocence, you can see her foot is kind of up on the back, and she's like, very shy-like, but still assertive in a way that I think young black girls are. It's that sometimes we're in your face and sometimes we're crying, but both two things, the vulnerability and the strength, can exist at the same time, and that's what I want the work to do.
Yeah. And can you explain a little bit about this breakdown of 80% collage, 20% painting?
Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be. It's not what happened. So my idea is, because I was a painter first, and it creeps out, and so what I wanted to do was have I wanted a flat surface with a white background, because the white just as important as the image. So, but the collage is the key, because it's the mixed media, it's the multiplicity of faces, it's the chance for you to go in and see that we're not this monolithic idea of blackness, we're multiple things. So the collage kind of opens up different pathways to talk about the work. So if I use all of that in painting, I don't think, because I was a painter, nobody cared, and I started doing collage, everybody cares. So I was like, okay, I want people to still care, so I just continued to do the collage. But the hand in particular is a piece of brown paper that I cut out like the hand. I affixed it to the work, and then I just drew with the pencil. The same pencils that I do the skin and do the legs, I use those same colors to do the hand, so. Yeah, it has to be more collage than painting. It's messed up if it doesn't.
Now that's all anyone's going to think about when they look at your work, like the mathematics of, is this actually 80% collage? Let's break down all of your works from tonight on.
It's not really a rule, but it's the rule in my little brain, so.
Well, okay, so moving to this one, is this 80% collage?
This is a lot of collage.
So what I love about this work, and what I love about your work in general, is that, in this age of mass media, social media, all of the images that are inundating us constantly, it's easy to glaze over all the images, artwork even, right? Like, what are the statistics and how long people actually stand in front of a work of art? It's seconds, right? But what your work does, it asks us to take a second look, to take a deeper look, because these images, these works, are so poignant and also so subtly disruptive, right? If you glaze over them, if you don't spend a lot of time looking, you miss what you're actually saying, the critiques that you are making, the real deep understanding of what society is for young black girls. And so this work in particular, Skewered from 2017, we have a young black girl who's, again, directly confronting us as the viewer, but she's holding two things in her hands, and I don't know if you've noticed this. But the way in which you use collage is so brilliantly disruptive to the ways in which we are so used to seeing that, again, if you don't look closely, you miss that she's holding fragments of faces of a white woman, right? And so can you talk about how you utilize collage in this way first, but then also, and I'm sure this is going to creep into this, the way in which you use collage to criticize and critique and call attention, right, to how media has stigmatized Black women, Black girls in general, but also how it's put so much undue pressure on women and Black women to fit certain standards of unattainable beauty, right? Unattainable ideals of what beauty is.
This piece in particular, you know, I've come from the school of Dadaism, when Hannah Hawk and Kurt Schwitter, when you use political types of imagery to gain agency, to gain power. So this was at the Philando Castile, when he was murdered in his car while trying to tell the police, I do have a weapon, but I have a permit to carry it, and he was still shot. So the power in existing with a white face as a woman than existing with a Black face. See, the arm is bigger, it's stronger, and she said, I'm gonna have to cloak myself because in my hair there are a lot of burnt matches. There are matches that have yet to be burned, and they will be burned. And so still with the multiplicity of the faces, and the strongest arm is the arm with the white face, because that's how we enter the world, unfortunately. Then the thin arm, the little skinny arm, is the one with dark skin, light skin. The idea of colorism and how that affects us. So you're right, it is cloaked in a lot of symbolism, but it's the medicine that's in front of that's behind the candy. So in a lot of my works, like the work before, where it's so much flowers and so many things that kind of, but the medicine is cloaked in the candy. So we need you to take the candy. And again, the whole idea of bringing people toward the work with an open hand, because my work can get in your face. I have chosen not to let that work, because sometimes it feels as if you're screaming at someone when you want to get their attention. We've all been in places where there's on the bus and somebody's screaming. We get still, we close our eyes, we hope, like, don't sit next to me. They always sit next to me. I'm just saying, they say, that's my people. So we all been there where that has happened, and that's not a conversation. So what I try to do in my work, and I believe me, in 4 o'clock in the morning, I think about, oh, it's too light, oh, it's too friendly, oh, it's too cute and all this. But if you take the time to unpack the work, live with it, see what I'm trying to say. So in that piece, when you talk about skirt and you talk about the hair pieces and the dark skin and light skin, and then the blonde, she has red hair actually, but she has bluish eyes. And then you put that over that, she's a different person. And then, look at the power. That's a lot of power in tears, and white women tears. And then she is void of clothing, but your eye gets to build a shirt, and possibly a shirt, and she has the gold nails, which talks about how Black bodies have always been commodity and currency in this country, and with mass incarceration. So you do everything right, and you still get murdered. You don't get the benefit of the doubt. So that's what the work is talking about.
Yeah, it's incredible and so powerful. And again, right, the fact that you unpack that work for us and that we're seeing it anew, right, it demonstrates for me, right, the power of close looking in a way that we have, I think, fallen out of practice doing, right? And so I love just seeing these 2 images back to back, the shoes.
Yeah.
And the incredible amount of attention that you place on the shoes in particular, and the fact that you're wearing amazing shoes that we just talked about before this program started. So is there, can you talk a little bit about the shoes in this case? Is there any special kind of symbolism or reasoning behind this real attention that you're paying to feet?
Well, and these works in particular, especially the early works, it was an opportunity for me to really do the painting part, because in the 2017, from 2017 to maybe 2019, it was all more the feet, the legs were more important, but the body was fully collage. And then I started to expand my practice, which I did a little bit more painting. But I love painting, like use the watercolor, use the acrylics, and then getting a pencil and getting in there and working. So you will see a lot of that in early works, but as we go through the works, it's going to start getting a little bit more flatter. It's not going to be a lot of the shoelaces won't be painted and stuff like that. Just taking away from more things and adding stuff to the work. But yeah, I mean, I had one woman say, I just love their little bare foot. I put shoes on everybody after that. It's like, I don't need you to look at nobody's feet. This is not a fetish thing. This is, it was talking about innocence. Not some weirdness, So now, as we go through the work, you're going to see that.
But it's also incredible that you take this feedback or comments, right? And then you incorporate it into your work moving forward. And so there's a whole trajectory, I guess, across the arc of your career where you're making adjustments to how you're doing the figures based on what people have observed or, what fetishes people have
Right.
that you don't want to.
The biggest insult is, this is fun. That's the biggest insult to me.
But who says? Okay.
People do say it. And I just, okay. That's why the mask's important, because you can I'm going to kill you.
That's the real reason why you say
that's the real reason why I still
yeah.
wear the mask, yeah.
It is good for hiding all those feelings.
Because it's not fun.
Yeah.
It's not, if you look at this work and think that this is fun, you don't know what fun is. Because existing in this body and all the pressure and the sexualization of you, the hypersexualization of you, the fact that you don't have feelings, the fact that you can take pain, that you can be the mule. All of that's not fun. And what I'm trying to do, and again, is to give you different ways to see it. It's not fun. Not fun at all.
Yeah. And the works themselves, just looking at this image again, right? You've provided so many different access points for people to enter into the work, right? So that's not, maybe you don't notice all the details, but you can't walk away from it without seeing this white woman's eyes staring out at you, right?
Blue eyes. Yeah.
And so and then the fact that it's so close up to the girl's face that is comprised of multiple faces, to see that and to really then think critically, what are you saying by juxtaposing these two faces together, right?
That one face can cover multiple faces and have the most power.
Yeah. Yeah. So given that, you're incorporating collage, and you've talked about this in a lot of instances, but can you maybe speak to where these images are coming from? I know you spend a lot of time on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't talk about that anymore.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
You're looking at mass media, you're looking at the history of image production, right, in a lot of ways. And I think what the work speaks to then, right, is the inundation that we have, right, of these images. And also how these images, how these works and the ways you've collaged them together are both, again, disruptive, but also really familiar, right? There's a way in which we oscillate as viewers in seeing your work and immediately feeling a sense of, at least for me, right, a sense of kind of understanding or recognition, right, of these girls, because this is every girl.
Right, it is.
These are girls that we see every day in our daily lives, and to then be able to kind of see that, but then also see, again, all these other collage elements that you're adding to it makes me then reconsider how I exist in the world in relationship to these girls.
Right. Well, when I used to talk about, resource and imagery, it was like, I will say this, the base face is almost the most beautiful, innocent face, and I destroy it by exaggerating certain things. So because I think people don't see children as children, they see them as little adults. Like adults that have years of experience, they're just short. And so they treat them as that.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. The whole idea of, when you think about Philando Castile, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on that, is that he had a tail light out, but the guy said, oh, he had a big nose. That's that's part of who he is. Okay,
Yeah.
he had a big nose. He's an African American, of course. And so that was some of the reasoning for even stopping him. What if he looked different and still had a, tail light out? Would they have stopped him? So just the idea of self,
Yeah.
cost him his life, really.
So true. And one of the other things that I appreciate about your practice is, many of your works are the single figure, right? Asking us to hone in on this individual, really see this person for who they are. But then you also do works where you feature a lot of repetition, right? This young girl in this work, An Act of Power, is repeated 3 times. And there are slight differences, but we see her, right, and this stance where her hip is cocked, she has a boxing glove on in one hand. And what I imagine when I see these works is I imagine a long line of girls, right, that continue off the canvas, off the paper. And that, for me, evokes a sense of community, a sense of strength in numbers, a sense that this community can exist for young girls, young Black girls, right? They just have to find it. They just have to find their people. So I wanted to ask you what repetition does for you in your practice, particularly not just in the repetition of figures, but also the repetition of certain elements that reappear, the boxing glove, the raised fist, things like that. What do you see it doing?
Well, I think it's this notion of sameness, that everybody's the same person. Sometimes people say, well, weren't you here over there? I said, no, I wasn't over there. They just see skin.
Yeah.
And then so this idea of sameness. So this was the work that I knew I had to get bigger, because I wanted to do the same face, the same hair, everything the same. That is actually the inside of an arm, but I made it look like it's the outside of the arm. I mean, the glove is the idea of power, that I can do this either by the raven or the dove. If you want me to, I can show my strength and my anger, but I can also be open to more stuff. And so this was the first time. And then I put, at that point, I was doing a lot of schoolgirl dresses and stuff like that. And again, the shoes, I love shoes. But it was just, oh, that was me. Okay, it's this power structure. And I think this was the second one I did, because I really loved doing them, a lot of girls. And then at one point I was going to just do a whole row of girls. It's just this repetitive notion of, no matter the same way that you look at little Black girls in 1960, I would argue that people are looking at them the same way today. Just maybe a couple things different, but not that much,
Yeah.
I know somebody's going to argue that point with me, so that's why I threw it up
Not
there.
me. It's not me.
I know Tammy might, so all right.
Well, so moving on to this image, the feeding ground, this is another image where you've repeated a figure. There's more differences in these 2 boys than in the previous work. But what I want to point out in this work in particular is that you are an artist who's not afraid of blank space and white space, right? And these works, right, the fact that it's a figure against a stark white background, for me, forces me to think about whiteness, right? And what that is, this blinding whiteness that you see in your works, but that at the same time, the figures are never overpowered by that whiteness, right? They have a sense of presence, an incredible sense of presence. And in this work in particular, these boys are wearing what is essentially white outfits, right? And so there's a potential for them to even fade into the background more, and they don't, right? We see them, I think, even more. And so can you talk about your use of the white space, the blank space?
So in particular, these kids, they have a reflective striped shirt on, which, a prison stripes. I did a lot of stripes and continue to do that in my practice. But we are sometimes seen through the lens of whiteness, and then whether or not you fit in. So I have these 2 little boys who kind of look the same. Again, I try to do the same face. Maybe we can consider them brothers. But the idea of the feeding ground is that these are the type of people who are filling up prisons. They have these shorts on, but then they have these green, this financial base bottom of their feet slides on, that they're in line. And then I got, Chris Paul's, I always do hands of different people. So that's Chris Paul's hand, who is like saying it just went in between and could grab them back in. So the idea of the white gaze is always upon us. You know, after COVID, I realized that the work started to get larger. And I think the idea of that is that we did not exist anymore in white space, that we wanted to take up the space, to see us to become more heroic in the work. And so when I look back at these, I know how important the white space, because everything is viewed through the lens of whiteness. And so it has its own language. It has its own way of speaking to the world, that you may see black faces here, but white space dominates this photo. I mean, this artwork. So, you know, all the things that we have to deal with every day.
Yeah, you're calling attention to it in a really pointed way that forces the viewer to confront their own ideas and understandings. Right. Yeah. So I'm showing you another image from upstairs in the show, and you can see the feeding ground on the right of this image. But what is so incredible about the installation and the exhibition is that this juxtaposition of your work again with Benny Andrews's work, and what you see on the purple wall is Benny's work, and then a video of you talking about talking about your experience seeing Benny Andrews's work, right, and how that impacted you. And you're someone who has such a deep and rich understanding of art history and the figurative tradition in art history, but also such a well-rounded understanding of Black cultural history as well. So can you speak a little bit about, you know, who are the figures that have come before you, who have inspired you?
Oh God, so many.
I mean, there's too many, but
well, I know, but let's just talk about Benny Andrews and how important he is, because he's one of my heroes.
Yeah.
PBS Austin did a series of videos on different artists, and Benny Andrews was one of the artists, and I remember just falling in love with him. They went into his studio, and he was pulling out sheets of paper, and he was talking about the process of building his collages, building his work. And he said, you know, his wife was in the other studio, and they fought over music. And he said, you know, he talked about how important it was to make the art come alive in the work. And I was like, this is great. I had no idea I was going to even move toward collage. It was just so far in the future. I didn't even know I was going to be a painter forever. I was looking at a guy who was working as an artist, and that was the main thing. So when I went to MoMA, and I walked into the room, and there was this beautiful Benny Andrews work. I don't know if it's in the show. I think it is.
A study for it.
Yeah, it's a study in the show. Yep. And it was just amazing. And I was like, it was my first time seeing it in real life, and I remember just saying, oh my God, this is so beautiful. And then there was, you know, other artists, I can't even think of their names because he was the main character. I said, you know, my work should be right next to that one, you know, because we could have a conversation. And this was years before this even thought about happening. So Benny Andrews has always been a part of my existence, even not knowing it. The fact that he's done everything, he was an activist, he showed the Black experience in the most prolific and respectable and honorable way. And I just love his work, and I try to emulate that. Yeah, there are a lot of artists. You know, I love Carrie Mae Weems and Dawu Bay. I mean, it's just too many. I mean, Jenny Holzer was no, not Jenny Holzer, but Jenny Saville. Yeah, she was in Houston, and I was like, how long is she going to be there? I'm going to get in my car and drive down there, you know, so I can meet her, you know. And so there are so many figurative artists that I love. I love abstract artists. I love people who've taken chances with their work, who didn't sit in the safeness of their work and never grew their work. You know, I always say, well, yeah, I love, you know, even Kerry James Marshall. His show up right now at you know, at Jack Shaman. It's beautiful. It's different than anything he's ever done before. And then when he showed in San Francisco, I think he had did those little dot pieces, and it was so different. I don't think it was very successful, but it was in MoMA. It was an SF MoMA, so it was successful enough. And I remember sneaking in through the through the gift store to meet him. So, you know, I was with one of my friends, and we said, let's just walk in like we know it. So we just walked in while they didn't tell us to stop. And I got a chance to really talk to him about his practice. He's also came to Austin, but it was just amazing. He's never going to stop doing good work and not work that you expect from him.
Yeah.
That's what I respect the most with artists.
But that's what you do too. I mean, I think what's incredible about your practice, and I'm just going to show a work by Benny Andrews, is that you both are committed to a core set of aesthetic principles, but that you're constantly pushing that, right? You're constantly pushing against it and expanding your practice, even while remaining committed, right, to collage, right? Remaining committed to depicting young black children, remaining committed to this use of like, you know, the punctum, right? This use of like that element of where you're forcing the viewer to really look closely. And so just, you know, I don't know if we want to talk about this particular work, but when I pulled this particular work out from all the wonderful Andrew's works upstairs is, again, thinking about the unexpected, right? And so for this particular work, we see this woman who, sixth floor walk up, the use of white space again, right? Which I see in both of your practices. The use of collage, as we can see here, the curtains and the dress are both made out of fabric, but this unexpected element too, and I don't know if people have noticed this in this particular work, but the shadow, right? The shadow does not actually reflect this woman's body, and in fact, she's raising up a flag, right? And so there's this moment of, I think we see this woman who's obviously very weary, right? She's worn down, she's, you know, tired and haggard looking, but that there's this element of hope and resilience in the practice, which I see so closely in a lot of your work too, right? So this particular work, Still We Rise, thinking about how you're incorporating the title, for example, but also these raised fists that form the crown of her forehead. As you were talking about earlier, these girls who are both vulnerable but also very strong, right? Her pose, she's hesitant looking, she's looking up, kind of almost as if she's seeking guidance, and yet we see her. So can you talk about this tension of, you know, the vulnerable and the strength, or kind of the criticism at the same time as you're displaying hope?
Just like the Andrews work, where you talked about she worked, that's quiet activism. That you don't have to be yelling it to show it's right there, it exists. She's not giving up, she's waving that flag. You know, he worked really hard to get more black artists into MoMA. And so the idea of a power in the face, power in that standing, you know, that, you know, I'm weary, but I ain't giving up. That hope that exists in the work, that's what I love about his work. I love the idea of mixed media in the work, the use of colors. I don't use a lot of bright colors well, I take that back. Sometimes I use bright colors because depending on where I am, I use the same, but I use a lot of gray tones in my work, a lot of greens and orchard colors, and I love the idea of this work doing the same thing. You know, and Still We Rise, I mean, Still Rise, it was about, you know, a bunch of Muhammad Ali's fists in that, Gloria Steinem fists, Michelle Obama's hands, all that existed. That those were all the history that existed. Those were the roots of which grew this girl, and the power that exists there. And so then I had the socks that looked like zebras. It's like this tribe of moving forward, a whole group of, you don't see a single zebra walking by itself wondering what's up. You know, it's always a big group of them. And so I tried to do that in the work early on. And sometimes I thought I telegraphed the stuff that I was trying to do. And I'm hoping I'm a little bit better in doing that. But just the patterns of up and downs and all that has never been steady, that we have peaks and valleys. And that was about the idea of the dress. And then there are happy times, because yellow is always happy.
It's incredible. I mean, I love the fact that you're thinking so deeply into the actual patterns that you're using in the clothing as well. And that, you know, again, I didn't see all that in the work. So thank you for breaking that down for us. It's incredible to be able to understand how deeply you are considering every single element in the work, right? That no element of the work is not considered or not thought out. It's amazing.
I was gonna say that's at MFA in cold ass Syracuse. You just think too much. All you could do is think it was always cold and snowy. So yeah. Yeah.
That's why you're still here.
Yeah.
That's why you came back after your
Right,
master's.
yeah, I came back. It was too cold for me.
I love thinking about how artists come up with titles for their works. I myself am awful at titling anything. Every exhibition, every essay that I've ever written, I feel like someone has either given me the suggestion for the title or it's a last minute panic of I need to write something down. So can you talk us through kind of how you come up with some of your titles, because they are so important to how we see the work, right? This is called the front lines.
Right. Well, I had people tell me I do horrible titles, and so I don't know. I mean,
Wait,
your
titles are
I get a
fantastic.
lot of criticism, sister. So I come from a family of 8 children. You get a lot of criticism. But in the front lines, and when I had the face, I remember this one lady said, I can't get that, Deborah. I can't have that hand in front of the boy and he's looking up. But the idea of, being born on the front lines and growing up, and you still, he has that idea of the boy king, and then he has different things in his path that block him, so he's always on the front line. When you see little boys in the 3rd grade already being put in, special classes because they're acting up, or they're hard to teach, or they won't be quiet, who wasn't? I mean, I look at all my little grade school and say, Deborah talks too much. Deborah talks too much. And so, yeah, I might be amenable, but I was chatting along while I was doing that. So this idea of not letting kids express who they are, they're figuring out who they are, sometimes in their action and the ways. Maybe they didn't sleep properly last night, or maybe something's going on in the home, but to stigmatize them and to label them, you're so early in your life that you're already on the front lines defending who you are.
Yeah.
And it's by all these other types of ideas people have put before you. So in this work, being on the front line, so I have the stripes with America and the right hand who's holding him down. Be quiet, don't raise your hand, you have nothing to say. And then I have the fist that says, I have plenty to say. I'm trying to say it quietly. Then you have the hand that's saying, no, boy, sit down. He said, no, I'm not a boy, I'm a king. So all those things, those patterns, the stripes, the whole idea is just a lot of that. It's about, little boys from 3rd grade.
Yeah, and I love his expression too, where he's just not having that hand.
Oh,
I mean,
he's looking up at it.
over
It's like,
yeah. So I put these two together because I want to talk about fashion. And, we talked about, you broke down for us, right, the stripes and the peaks in the girl's dress. But I think I said this to you before when I came and visited your studio.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
I think Deborah Roberts should start a fashion line.
I know.
Right?
I know.
I mean, the patterns are incredible. Even, okay, not a fashion line, a fabric line.
Yeah.
Right?
Not all those fabrics are mine. You want me to get Deborah Roberts sued. But, well, I think the idea of some of those, like some of them are rugs, some of them are just, pattern stripes. So now I type in the computer, I need stripes. But when you think of little kids, and when they first have that start, that act of independence, first thing they want to do is put on clothes, and sometimes they're crazy clothes. I see a kid with shorts on and black tights and a football shirt on with a scarf, and I'm like, what happened? It's like their closet attacked them. And and I'm thinking, and the parents, you allow that because that's the first act. And you try to cajole them and say, well, maybe not a boot and a sandal. Maybe we can do 2 boots. So you think of ways. And if we want to go back to enslavement, when the idea of freedom was the act of naming, of coming up with names that I can name my child this. And so these little steps of things like that I try to put into work. But yeah, I mean, Jonathan Adler would kill me if I come out with that pattern at the bottom. And I think one of those is a rug, and it's just, it doesn't belong to me.
But it belongs to these children.
Yeah, it belongs to these children. Yes.
So what are you thinking about when you're putting different patterns together? Like how, you've broken down for both of these two works, but are you considering, how should I put this? Like the clothing itself, what does the clothing itself say about the children that you're depicting?
Freedom. Just freedom. We lose that freedom.
Yeah.
I mean, if you walk around with stuff like this on the day, as a 40-year-old person, I mean, they got a net around you soon, So the idea of that type of freedom that goes away before the public attacks you,
Yeah.
I think you can have it to 12 before they start saying, she's weird. But when you're 3 and you're in your ballerina suit, little thing with pants on, regular pants, you're like, oh, that's cute. But you go 50 years old and walking around with a ballerina and regular pants. Yeah, you're going to Shoal Creek, yeah.
I have a niece, and she always says, whenever someone looks at her, kind of askance at her outfit, she always says that her mom told her it's okay not to match.
Right.
She's 8. We'll see how, maybe she'll have 4 more years left with that. But you're right? It's a sense of freedom that comes with being able to announce who
Right.
you are as your personality, right? Your
Right.
clothing depicts who you are, right? Or portrays who you are out in the world. And so the sense of freedom that comes with being able to be boisterous in the way you present yourself, right? Even if it's not talking, but if it's the way that you dress yourself, I think is something that we, even from an early age, hold back from children, right? I mean, I have to credit my sister-in-law for letting my niece walk out the door in some of the craziest outfits I've seen. So, yeah, it's just, I appreciate the ways in which you think about pattern and fabric and clothing with these girls, with these children.
Because my mom, when we were 8, 9, and 10, that's when my sisters were 8, 9, and 10, we were like a year apart. She didn't even try. She'd go get a dress, red, green, purple. It's the same dress, it's just a different color. So, if you want to be something different, you couldn't because you had a red, green, purple dress with your sisters. It was just a different color. It was not even thoughts, let's get a red dress right here. It was the same pattern dress. So it was the same dress. People thought we were triplets. So I like that idea of that type of freedom, with hair and clothing and stuff like that.
Yeah. What color did you get?
Oh, man. I think I got a red dress. And I have a picture of me, too. My arms are crossed. I'm like, okay. Yeah, I wasn't a difficult child, but I talk too much. In Texas, we have a lot of pastors. We call them pastors. They fields. Y'all might call them fields. I had to stand in the field a lot because I talked too much. I loved it. I was free.
You were free. Where else could you be more free than a pastor?
Yep.
So this work is a work in the Studio Museum in Harlem's collection, and we're so lucky that you allowed us to have it in our collection. This came in actually right before the pandemic in 2019. So for the majority of your career, you really focused on depicting young Black girls, and that was a very deliberate choice because you're a woman, you're a girl, and you knew what it was to grow up, right? And knew all the prejudices and the stigmatization and everything, and the pressure that you faced, right? So can you talk a little bit about what prompted your inclusion of boys? Was there something that happened that kind of resulted in you including boys?
Well, so much of the public started asking for them, and then I didn't really knew that I wanted to because I don't know what it feels like to be a male. But I said, I'm going to try. Everything in the summer, I give it a try and see how it works. The first ones were not as sophisticated as the girls because I've had years to work on them. In that 2019 time, I was researching faces and came across the George Denny face. and a 14-year-old boy from South Carolina who was executed for falsely accused of killing 2 little white girls and carrying their bodies all the way across the field and disposing of them when he was like 108 pounds. He couldn't have carried 2 girls. And so he was tried within 10 minutes. The jury came back and found him guilty. Within 60 days, the total was 80 days total, but right before his 15th birthday, he was executed. And he was so small, he couldn't fit on the thing, so they piled books. And they put the thing on his head, and it fell off, so it took about 3 times to kill him. So when I saw this face, it just, I hear people say this all the time. And I've said this story too. When they say, oh, I was haunted by this story, I really don't believe them. I'm just like, yeah, right. But when I saw this face, it bothered me for a whole week. And I said, well, let me, take a chance of doing it. And I did it, and it was so compelling. And the more I told people about the story, the more of these I've done. And so far, everybody, sometimes we know about Emmett Till, but he's one of many.
Yeah.
But his story, 80 years, I think it was 80 years later, they reversed that thing. It's too late. And so to tell his story, to tell the world this, I think it's some of the most important work that I've done. Why not the Studio Museum? I called him and said, I need to give you this work because I want this story. At that point, it wasn't in museums. I think this was the first museum. And I did 10 of these works on either paper or canvas, and they're all in major, not all, but I counted 6 of them in major institutions. So we have the Studio Museum, Crystal Bridges, we have the National Portrait Gallery, we have the Portland Museum, the other ones that I can't count. That's my 50 years old. I'm not 50. I'm older than 50. But it's the fact that all of them are important. But to me, the National Portrait Gallery in the nation's capital, where laws are made, this boy, he's right there. He is a symbol of what America does to black boys.
Yep.
So this was so very important, and I always take my time in doing these. He's the only one that I always do his exact face. Mm-hmm. I may have added early on James Baldwin because I think we're living in Baldwin times. And so I wanted to do this face where at the end he's yelling, stop. And so then I have that's his number for his little prison uniform. That's why the stripes are so important in the work. They didn't let this boy grow up, No. He only, his thing was, it's with his twin sister. And he said, I saw them. That cost him his life. Yeah. If he would just, didn't say anything. But he said, I saw them, and no matter what, sometimes somebody, if we can't find out who did it, you did it. And, especially in 1944. Yeah. And even today, too. But anyway.
So George Stinney Jr. was executed in 1944, and it took 70 years, as you alluded to, 70 years for him to be officially exonerated. Mm-hmm. And that didn't happen until 2014. Yes. And so I think what you are doing in your work is raising really critical issues, right? Why did it take 70 years for this 14-year-old boy to be exonerated for a crime he didn't commit? What is it? And as you said, the importance of one of the Stinney works being included in the National Portrait Gallery, right? For people who come to our nation's capital to see that work on view, right? And to then have to be able to reflect, right, on the unjust laws of this country, but also a long history of violence perpetrated against young people of color in this country that is still continuing to this day, right? And so what I appreciate about this work in particular, especially because it is in the Studio Museum's collection, is that it is one of 10, and I think you're making more, or you might continue to... No, you're done?
I've done some little small works on paper, but I did what I needed to do, and then at one point, if you continue to do them, you're doing it for a different reason.
Yeah.
And I think that this is important work. This is some of the most important work I think I've ever done. I did right by George. That's what I wanted. And he doesn't bother me. He goes about his life, and I don't have to think about him anymore, and I don't want to do anymore. And I think what we needed to do, what I needed to do with him, I did.
It's incredible. And again, I think the use of the white space here is so effective too, because he's in and you do this a lot in your works, right? You put the figures on the sides of the canvas or the paper, right? Cornering them in a way,
Right.
but they're still dominating the
Right.
space. And we see that quite clearly in this painting. Can you speak a bit too about your use of paint, as you did earlier, but in particular here, I love the way in which you always paint either the legs or the arms. And so what is it about those particular appendages that calls to you in terms of utilizing your hand and painting them in particular?
You have to see the skin. It's so important. You know, I never paint the neck, but you have to see the skin. The skin is so important, juxtaposed to that white background, because people don't want to see you. You're right. I pushed him to the very edge of the paper where I'm pushing him off. He is being judged by all that white space, but he is standing there with his hand folded to take it. And so he's without shoes. He's in socks. He didn't have shoes for a whole year. I mean, it would have been, to get back to the story, but it would have been, you would have been able to see someone barefooted carrying somebody. They would have, their feet wouldn't have, would have showed that type of labor. But so in a lot of these works, I put him without shoes, or sometimes I put him with socks on, because it's also a sign of like innocence, and that idea of these white socks. A lot of these works, they're so important because he had baggy, his clothes didn't fit. He was in prison with grown men. He was a little 14-year-old boy. So when you see a photo of him walking, the clothes are just too big, and so it's important to do the skin and all the works. I don't put it on the neck because I say any face can be under that neck, and so I never put the skin tone underneath there, and I just tried to match the best way I could to the original prison uniform, and he had a little clip. It was awful. Can you imagine? They didn't even let us see his parents. He saw his mother the day before he was executed. He hadn't seen her that whole time. And they had to leave town. He only recently, I think in the last 6 years, got a headstone, because they couldn't even tell people where it was, because they would come and damage it, where he was, his resting place. So it's the poor boy. He just had a lot.
Your work, I personally did not know his story until this work, right? And so the fact that you have raised such critical awareness of his story it speaks to your commitment, right, to the work that you're doing in your practice, right? It's not just the work itself, but it's about the deep thought and care that you're putting in, and the research that you're putting in, right, into unveiling and uncovering these hidden stories, and putting them out on view so that we, right, are educated, and that we are then forced to reckon, right, with what it means to be a person of this country, to reckon with this long history. So it's a credit, I think, truly to you, and the fact that you devoted 10 works, right, to relaying Stinnie's story for us.
Well, this is no different from George Floyd.
Yeah.
He was executed right there on the street, on the side. He wasn't a little boy, but people witnessed it. No one stepped up, no one stopped it. So you think he is just one of many,
Yeah. And I had the opportunity to visit the George Floyd Global Memorial just a couple months ago, and the fact that the community has rallied to care for that space in the face of, city, government, police kind of attempts to break it down, right? The fact that they've assembled this memorial space to ensure that his legacy lives on is just incredible. And I see that in your work too, right? You've ensured that Stinnie's story will continue to be understood and heard and seen and witnessed. So.
Yeah, this was the catalyst for creating boys. You know, once I figured out what I needed the boys to look like, after that, you know, they became stronger. And the message, and just talking to other men and what they saw and what they went through. We have a shared experience, both black men and black women, but it is different. You know, it's not the same. So having those little things, like I said, you know, the front lines, you know, having this little boy, you know, he's being told that he can't do things, but he looks up and saying, you know, his fist is out. You know, it's not violence. It's just, you know, I'm going to use my power to get through this.
I want to end with one last image from the show, just because, again, we see Stinny on the right here, but also an image of another boy on the left side. One of the many things that I appreciate you about so much is that you're so honest and open about your career and the trajectory of your career, and also you give great advice to everyone, but particularly to artists, to young artists, right? Emerging artists, I should say. Is there one thing that you wish you had known earlier on about the art world, about your practice?
One thing.
Well, okay, we don't have that much time. You could give a whole lecture.
Poor, they ain't never gonna have good credit. You know, there's a lot of things you can say. Go to your mama's house, got to get some eggs, got to get some potatoes. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. Run from the tax man. I mean, there's a lot of things of being an artist. That, I mean, the one thing that I try to do in my practice, and we talked about this early on, is try to get, I don't want to be a gatekeeper. I don't. I really, that's not my thing. I don't think it should be as hard as it was for me. So I try to, you know, try to knock down some of the steps, you know, through my Saturday morning talks. And then when I talk to other artists, when I go to schools, I have, you know, a list of things to kind of knock down those. How can I get on Connie Choi's, you know, feed? How can she see my work? Well, anytime she makes a hashtag, contemporary art, painting, mixed media, whatever, the algorithm of Instagram, which is a tool, is going to put me on your feed because I'm going to use the same hashtags. So you try to give people different ways to manage the art world, to navigate it. It's just too much to tell you the things I wished I would know. I didn't know. I think had I known how hard it was, I wonder if I would have stayed with it.
Really? Mm-hmm. Well, you stuck with it for so long.
Yeah, I was dumb. I was like, I mean, I was all in. When you get 45, you all in. I don't care, whatever it is, you all in. And you got to say, oh yeah, I'm all in, because it was too late to be the ballerina I wanted to be. All the linebacker, the Chicago Bears. I mean, you can't, you know, all the little childhood dreams that you have, they are gone. So now you have dedicated your life to doing this work, and you have to continue it, because if you stop at a certain point, you know, I went back to school. I went back to Syracuse. I mean, if you stop at a certain point, you know, then you miss the blessing. What was missing from my work was literature. I didn't know it. Look how long it took me to find that. When literature met my work, it was what it needed. It was the medicine to help it grow and to get better. Yeah. I never would have known that had I stopped. And so, and now look, next thing you know, Jed's a millionaire. There you go. That's what I say all the time. That's not true. That's not true. I ain't a millionaire. Yeah, I am. No, I'm not. No.
Okay, one last question before we wrap up. In that, we are 16 days away from the end of the year.
Yeah.
Have you been doing some reflecting?
I'm going to start reflecting Monday.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, seriously. I mean, you know, they say the unexamined life is a life not worth living. So what I do is I always, you know, in December, sometime a little bit in January, I go somewhere quiet, you know, and I think about everything. I make sometimes the big decisions, you know, whether it be with galleries or where I'm going to live or whatever, or something I need to do, something that I haven't done. I'm very bad at saying no. I have to get better at that. Figure out some tools, and whether it might be therapy, whatever, just to figure out ways of giving your life a little bit more space. So yeah, I'm going to England. I tell you, I'm going to London.
And you're going to spend that. Okay, great.
I'm going to the farmhouse.
Is there anything you're looking forward to in 2023?
My first show in Paris is in 2023. Thank you. Yep. Last time I was in Paris, I was fleeced, taken advantage of for the young people. So I want to go back there and, do my show. And even though I can't speak French, I have to get better at saying, call the police. If somebody, they fleece you, you say, well, if I did something wrong, call the police. They don't want the police to come. I didn't know that. Yeah. So I want to definitely do that show.
Where is it?
I knew you was going to ask. The only reason because it has a French name and I can't pronounce it, and I'm really bad at names. But it's, I'll post about it. It's May 25th. And then I'm doing Site Santa Fe in New Mexico. And then I'm doing a show maybe in New York City, maybe. We don't know yet. It's up in the air.
So all of you all, we'll see you, Paris, then Santa Fe, then possibly New York in 2023. Thank you.
Thank you.